The impacts came without warning. One moment the ship was gliding smoothly through space. The next, alarms screamed through every corridor and cabin. The lights flickered, then shifted to emergency red. The gentle hum of the engines became a grinding, rattling sound that made the walls shake. Doyon jerked awake as his cabin tilted sideways. He grabbed the edge of his bed to keep from falling. The alarm was so loud it hurt his ears. Red light bathed everything, turning his small room into something nightmarish. He could hear screaming from the corridors outside, passengers crying out in fear and confusion. He forced himself to think clearly. First rule of any emergency: assess the situation. He tapped the wall panel next to his bed, trying to access the ship's information system. The screen flickered, showing corrupted data and error messages. Whatever had happened, it was serious. The ship lurched again. Doyon heard a deep groaning sound from somewhere below, metal under stress, straining against forces it was not designed to handle. He grabbed his work jacket and stumbled toward the door. It opened with a hiss, revealing a corridor full of panicking aliens. They rushed in all directions, some trying to reach escape pods, others frozen in place with fear. A Velcrin crew member pushed through the crowd, trying to maintain order. "All passengers must remain calm. Return to your cabins and await instructions." But nobody listened. Fear had taken over, and fear made people irrational. Doyon pressed himself against the wall to avoid being trampled. He needed to find out what was happening. He needed information. He made his way toward the nearest information terminal, fighting against the flow of the crowd. The terminal screen showed emergency alerts scrolling too fast to read. He managed to catch a few keywords. Hull breach, reactor damage, navigation failure. That was bad. Very bad. On the bridge, Captain Thalis stood rigid at his command station, his 4 eyes scanning multiple displays at once. Every screen showed red warnings. Every system reported failures or critical damage. His crew worked frantically at their stations, but he could see the fear in their movements. This was not supposed to happen. This was not in any protocol. Morven approached, his voice tight with stress. "Captain, the aft section took multiple impacts from micrometeorite debris. The swarm was undetectable until impact. We have breaches in sections 7 through 12. The reactor shielding is damaged. The primary navigation array is completely offline." Tholis felt something cold settle in his chest. "Casualty report? 17 passengers injured, none critical yet." "But Captain," Morven hesitated, "the reactor is destabilizing. If we cannot repair the shielding, we will have a meltdown in less than 6 hours. 6 hours. Tholis accessed the damage reports himself, hoping to find an error in the data. But the numbers were clear. The reactor's magnetic containment field was failing. Radiation levels were rising in the engineering section. And without the navigation system, they could not jump to faster-than-light travel. They could not even send a distress signal strong enough to reach the nearest station. They were trapped. "Begin emergency protocols," Tholis ordered. "All engineering teams to the reactor section. Prioritize containment field restoration." "Yes, Captain." Doyon reached the engineering deck after following emergency signs through the maze of corridors. The security door was open, and he could see Velcrin engineers gathered around control panels, their faces pale with stress. They were talking rapidly in their own language, gesturing at screens full of data. He stepped through the door. One of the Velcrin noticed him immediately. "This area is restricted. Passengers must return to their cabins." "I'm an engineer," Doyon said calmly. "I work with fusion reactors and power systems." "What's the situation?" The Velcrin stared at him. "You are human. You do not have clearance to—" "I don't care about clearance," Doyon interrupted. "You have a reactor problem. I can help." Chief Engineer Morven turned at the sound of the conversation. He looked at Doyon with all 4 eyes, evaluating, calculating. Time was running out, and following procedure had not saved them from this disaster. Perhaps it was time to try something different. "Let him see the data," Morven said. The other engineers looked shocked, but they obeyed. Doyon moved to the main display and began reading the damage reports. His mind worked quickly, processing information, building a mental picture of the ship's wounded systems. The reactor was losing containment. The magnetic field generators were damaged. Coolant flow was reduced by 40%. Power distribution was unstable. It was a cascading failure, each problem making the others worse. If nothing changed, the reactor would go critical in less than 6 hours. releasing enough radiation to kill everyone on board before the explosion tore the ship apart. "What are you doing to fix it?" Doyen asked. Morven gestured to his team. "We are following repair protocols, but the damage is extensive. We cannot complete repairs in time using standard procedures." "Then don't use standard procedures," Doyen said. He pointed at the display. "You're trying to repair the primary containment system, but that will take too long. Instead, reroute power from the secondary grid to boost the backup containment field. It's not designed to handle full reactor load, but if you reinforce it with the emergency power reserves, it might hold long enough to stabilize the core." The Velcrin engineers looked at each other in confusion. "That is not... We cannot. The backup system is not rated for..." "I know it's not rated for it," Doyen said. "But it's better than letting the reactor explode. Trust me, I've done this before. Not on a ship this size, but the principles are the same." Morven was silent for a long moment. Everything in his training told him to refuse, to follow established procedures, to trust in Velcrin engineering standards. But his training had not prepared him for this. His procedures had no answer for a problem this severe. He made a decision that went against everything he had been taught. "Show us what to do." Doyen rolled up his sleeves and got to work. Doyen moved through the engineering section like he had been working there his entire life. He ignored the protests of Velcrin engineers and focused on the damaged systems, his mind racing through calculations and possibilities. The reactor room was a mess of flashing warning lights and overheated equipment, but he could see the underlying structure, the bones of the machine beneath all the advanced technology. It was not so different from Earth reactors, really. Bigger, more efficient, more elegant in design, but the basic principles remained the same. Contain the reaction, manage the heat, distribute the power. Everything else was just details. "I need access to the power distribution junction," Doyen said, pointing at a sealed panel on the far wall, "and someone who knows where the emergency reserve batteries are stored." A young Velcrin engineer named Halvix stepped forward. "I can show you, but I must warn you. Those reserves are only meant for life support systems. Using them for the reactor is against safety regulations." "Right now, safety regulations are the least of our problems," Doyen replied. "If we don't stabilize the reactor, there won't be any life support to worry about." Halvix hesitated, then nodded. "This way." They moved through cramped maintenance corridors, places where the ship's elegant design gave way to pure functionality. Pipes and cables ran along the walls in complex bundles. The air was hot and smelled of ozone and burnt insulation. Warning signs in multiple languages covered every surface. Doyen opened access panels as they went, examining the power distribution network. The Velcrin had built everything with redundancy and backup systems, but they had also built it to be maintained according to strict procedures. There were safety locks and authorization requirements on nearly every critical system. It was designed to prevent accidents, but it also prevented quick improvisation. "How do I override these safety locks?" Doyen asked, gesturing at a control panel. Halvix's eyes widened. "You cannot. Only the chief engineer has authorization codes." "Then get him. Now." While Halvix ran to fetch Morven, Doyen studied the power grid layout on his datapad. He was building a plan in his mind, a way to channel power from systems that were not designed to work together. It would be messy. It would probably violate 100 different safety standards, but it would work. Probably Morven arrived minutes later, breathing hard from running. "What do you need?" "Authorization to override safety locks on the emergency power grid," Doyen said. "I need to reroute everything through the backup containment system." Morven looked at the control panel, understanding immediately what Doyen intended. "That will burn out the backup system within hours. We will have no redundancy." "We don't need redundancy if we're all dead," Doyen said bluntly. "This buys us time. Once the reactor is stable, we can work on permanent repairs." It was a gamble. A human gamble. Morven had spent his entire career avoiding gambles, trusting in tested procedures and proven methods. But he had also watched those procedures fail to prevent this disaster. Maybe it was time to trust something different. He entered his authorization codes. The safety locks disengaged with a soft beep. Doyen got to work immediately. His hands moved quickly across the control interface, rerouting power connections and reconfiguring system priorities. Halvix watched in fascination as the human worked, seeing patterns and solutions that the Velcrin engineers had missed. It was not that Doyen was smarter, Halvix realized. It was that he thought differently. He did not see rules and restrictions. He saw possibilities. "Hand me that plasma coupler," Doyen said, pointing at a tool rack. Halvix grabbed it and passed it over. "What are you doing?" "Bypassing the primary distribution node," Doyen replied, working as he spoke. "The Velcrin built in too many safety checks. Every time I try to push more power through, the system automatically throttles it back. So I'm going around the safeties, feeding power directly into the backup containment field. But that could overload the—" "It could," Doyen agreed. "But it won't. I'm monitoring the load in real time. As long as we keep it below critical threshold, we'll be fine." Halvix was not sure fine was the right word, but he had to admit the human seemed to know what he was doing. The readouts on the control panel were changing, power levels shifting as Doyen rewired the system on the fly. Back on the bridge, Captain Tholis watched the reactor status display with growing disbelief. The containment field was stabilizing. Power output was returning to safe levels. Radiation readings were dropping. It should not have been possible, not this quickly, not with the extent of the damage they had suffered. "Morven," Tholis said into his communicator. "Report what is happening in engineering." There was a pause before Morven replied. "Captain, the human is—" "He is fixing it. I do not fully understand his methods, but they are working. The human—" Tholis felt something he rarely experienced, genuine surprise. "Explain." "He is rerouting power through unauthorized channels and bypassing safety systems. By all standard engineering principles, it should not work. But it does." Tholis looked at the display again. The numbers did not lie. The reactor was stabilizing. "Continue," he ordered. "But monitor the situation closely. If there is any sign of danger—" "Understood, Captain." In the engineering section, Doyen wiped sweat from his forehead. The temperature had risen as he worked, heat pouring from overworked systems. But the reactor was responding. The containment field was holding. They had bought themselves time. "That's stage 1, Doyen said, looking at Morven. "The reactor won't explode. But we're not done yet. I need to work on the coolant system next, or this temporary fix won't last." Morven nodded slowly. He was beginning to understand something important. This human did not see the ship as a perfect system to be maintained. He saw it as a living thing that could be adapted and changed. It was a foreign concept, but it was keeping them alive. "What do you need?" Morven asked. Doyen smiled, a tired but determined expression. "Tools, access to the coolant distribution network, and maybe some coffee if you have it. This is going to take a while." Halvix looked at Morven. "Coffee?" "It is a human stimulant beverage," Morven explained. "I believe we have some in the passenger section's Earth cuisine station." "Get it," Doyen said. "And then let's save this ship." The Velcrin engineers gathered around, ready to assist. They still did not fully understand the human's methods, but they were learning. And more importantly, they were beginning to trust him. 4 hours after the impact, the reactor was stable, but the ship was still in danger. Doyen had bought them time, but time was not salvation. In the bridge, Captain Tholis received a report from his navigation officer that made his blood run cold. "Captain, we have a problem. Without the navigation array, our trajectory is uncontrolled. We are drifting toward a rogue planet's gravity well. At current speed, we will be pulled into its atmosphere in 3 hours and 40 minutes. Tholis studied the navigational display. The planet appeared on the screen, a dark sphere with no sun to orbit, drifting alone through interstellar space. It was massive, nearly twice the size of Earth, with a dense atmosphere that would tear the ship apart long before they reached the surface. "Can we alter course with maneuvering thrusters?" Tholis asked. The navigation officer checked his calculations. "Insufficient thrust. The planet's gravity is too strong. We would need main engines at full power, but we cannot engage them without a functioning navigation computer." Tholis felt the weight of command pressing down on him. Every decision led to the same conclusion. There was only one logical option left. Prepare to abandon ship. All crew and passengers to escape pods. Morven's voice came through the communicator. "Captain, we do not have enough pods. The impacts destroyed Storage Bay 3. We lost 38% of our escape capability." The bridge fell silent. Tholis forced himself to ask the question. "How many can we evacuate?" "Approximately 1,200 passengers and crew. No more. 2,000 souls on board. Only 1,200 could be saved." The mathematics were simple and horrible. 800 people would die because there was not enough room in the escape pods. Tholis had been trained for many situations, but not this. The Velcrin prided themselves on safety, on redundancy, on never having to make such choices. But training in pride meant nothing now. He had to decide who would live and who would die. Begin evacuation procedures, Thalos ordered, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Priority to families with young offspring, then the injured, then… Wait. The voice came from the engineering section. Doyen had been listening to the bridge communications. Don't abandon ship yet. Human, this is not your concern, Thalos replied coldly. We have no other options. You have one option, Doyen said. Fly the ship manually. The bridge officers looked at each other in confusion. The navigation officer spoke up. Manual flight is impossible, Captain. The ship is too large, too complex. No one has piloted a vessel this size manually in over 200 years. It cannot be done. It can be done, Doyen insisted. The maneuvering thrusters are still operational. I can build a manual control interface using the auxiliary computer systems. It won't be elegant, but it will give us control. Thalos felt anger rising, an unusual emotion for a Velcrin. You are suggesting we risk everyone's lives on an improvised system? That is insanity. What's insane is leaving 800 people to die when we have another option, Doyen shot back. Give me 2 hours. If I can't build a working control system by then, we evacuate as planned. But at least try. Morven's voice joined the conversation. Captain, I recommend we allow him to try. We have time before the evacuation must begin. Thalos wanted to refuse. Every regulation, every procedure said this was wrong. But he remembered the reactor, remembered how the human had done the impossible once already, and he remembered the faces of his crew, the passengers, the 800 people who would be left behind. You have 2 hours, Thalos said finally. Not 1 minute more. Doyen was already moving. He grabbed Halvix and 2 other Velcrin engineers. I need access to the auxiliary computer core. All the spare interface modules you can find, and someone who knows the thruster control systems inside and out. They ran through the ship, gathering equipment and personnel. Word spread quickly among the passengers. The human was trying to save them. Some aliens whispered prayers in their native languages. Others simply watched with desperate hope. In a small computer room near the bridge, Doyen spread out his equipment and began building. He pulled circuit boards from damaged systems and wired them together in configurations that made the Velcrin engineers shake their heads. He programmed control algorithms by hand, typing code faster than they could follow. He tested connections with handheld scanners, making adjustments on the fly. Halvix tried to help, but he was mostly just handing tools and watching in amazement. How do you know what to do? We have no manual for this, no procedure. Because I'm not following a manual, Doyen replied without looking up from his work. I'm building something new. Humans are good at that. We don't have the best technology, so we learn to make do with what we have. We improvise, we adapt, we find a way. Morven entered the room, checking on their progress. He saw the tangled mess of wires and jury-rigged components and felt his confidence waver. This looked like chaos, not engineering. But he had learned to trust the humans' chaos. It had saved them once. Perhaps it would save them again. How much longer? Morven asked. Doyen checked his datapad. 1 hour, maybe less. I'm ahead of schedule. The captain is preparing to begin evacuation if you fail. I won't fail. Doyen's voice was firm, but his hands were shaking slightly from exhaustion and adrenaline. He had not slept in over 24 hours. His body was running on willpower and coffee. Halvix brought him another cup of the dark earth beverage. Doyen drank it gratefully, the bitter taste barely registering. He returned to his work, fingers flying across keyboards and through cable connections. On the bridge, Thalos watched the clock count down. 2 hours became 1 hour. 1 hour became 30 minutes. The planet loomed larger on the display, its gravity pulling them closer with every passing second. He prepared the evacuation order, knowing that in minutes he would have to choose who lived and who died. And then, with only minutes to spare, Doyen's voice came through the communicator. Captain, the control system is online. It's crude, but it's functional. You can fly the ship. Thalos looked at his navigation officer. Is this true? The officer checked his displays, eyes widening in shock. Captain, I'm reading manual thruster control capability. The interface is unusual, but it appears operational. Thalos sat in his command chair, staring at the new control panel that had appeared on his primary display. It was simple, almost primitive compared to the normal navigation systems, just basic directional controls and thruster power settings. But it was there. It was real. He had a choice to make. Trust the humans' improvised system, or condemn 800 people to death. Cancel evacuation, Tholis ordered. All crew to stations. We are going to fly this ship. The bridge of the Celestial Traverse had never been so tense. Every crew member sat rigid at their stations, watching their displays with fear and determination. Captain Tholis gripped the manual controls, his 4 hands positioned over the interface that Doyen had built. The controls were simple, almost crude compared to the sophisticated systems he was used to, but they responded when he touched them. That was something. Navigation, give me our current trajectory, Tholis ordered. We will enter the planet's upper atmosphere in 43 minutes at current speed, the navigation officer reported. Recommend immediate thruster burn to alter course. Tholis studied the trajectory display. The ship was massive, over 2 kilometers of metal and machinery that had never been designed for manual flight. Modern starships relied on computers to make thousands of micro-adjustments every second, keeping everything stable and balanced. Without those computers, flying the ship would be like trying to steer a mountain. But he had no choice. 800 people were counting on him. Everyone was counting on him. Engaging maneuvering thrusters, Tholis announced. His hands moved across the controls, activating the thruster clusters on the port side of the ship. He felt the vibration through the deck as massive jets of plasma fired into the void. Nothing happened. The ship continued on its course, barely deviating. The planet's gravity was too strong, the thrusters too weak. Insufficient thrust, the navigation officer said. We need more power. In the engineering section, Doyen was already working on that problem. He had known the standard thruster output would not be enough. That was why he had spent the last hour setting up additional power feeds, routing energy from every non-essential system he could find. Climate control, recreational facilities, cargo bay lighting. Everything that was not critical to survival was being stripped of power and channeled to the thrusters. Morven, I need you to shut down the passenger deck environmental systems, Doyen said. Reroute all that power to the thruster grid. Morven hesitated. That will make the passenger areas uncomfortable. Temperature will drop significantly. Better cold than dead, Doyen replied. Do it. Morven gave the order. Throughout the ship, aliens felt the temperature begin to drop as heating systems shut down. Some complained, but most understood. They had heard what was happening. The human was trying to save them, and temporary discomfort was a small price to pay. On the bridge, Tholis saw his power readings climb. Thruster power increasing, 20% above normal, 25, 30. That's all I can give you. Doyen's voice came through the communicator. Any more and we risk burning out the thruster systems completely. Tholis adjusted his grip on the controls. Understood. Engaging full burn. The ship shuddered as every maneuvering thruster fired at maximum power. The deck tilted slightly, and crew members grabbed their stations to keep balance. Alarms beeped warnings about stress on the hull and overheating in the thruster assemblies. But slowly, impossibly, the massive ship began to turn. Course is changing, the navigation officer reported. New trajectory indicates we will clear the atmosphere by 18 kilometers. 18 kilometers. It was a razor's edge, barely enough margin for error, but it was something. Doyen arrived on the bridge, breathing hard from running through the ship. He moved to stand beside Tholis, watching the displays. You're doing good, Captain, but we need to maintain this burn for at least 20 minutes. Can the thrusters handle it? I do not know, Tholis admitted. We have never pushed them this hard for this long. Then we'll find out together, Doyen said. He pulled up additional readouts on a nearby console, monitoring temperatures and power flow. I'll watch the engineering systems. If something starts to fail, I'll tell you. They work together, human and Velcrin, improvising solutions to problems as they appeared. When a thruster assembly overheated, Doyen rerouted coolant from another system. When power distribution became unbalanced, Tholis adjusted the burn pattern to compensate. It was not elegant. It was not by any manual or procedure. But it worked. In the passenger sections, aliens pressed against windows, watching the dark planet grow larger. They could see the curve of its atmosphere now, a thin line of light against the blackness. They were getting closer. Too close. Halvix ran through the engineering section, coordinating teams that worked to keep failing systems operational. Smoke rose from overheated circuit boards. Cables sparked and sizzled. The smell of burnt insulation filled the air, but they held together. The Velcrin engineers, once so reliant on procedures and protocols, were learning to improvise under Doyen's example. They stopped waiting for authorization and started making decisions, patching problems with whatever materials they could find. "Captain, thruster assembly 4 is critical," Doyen called out. "Temperature is redlining. If it blows, we lose 20% of our thrust." Tholis checked his trajectory. They were so close to clearing the planet's gravity well. So close. How long can it last? Maybe 5 minutes, maybe less. How long until we clear the gravity well? The navigation officer calculated quickly. 12 minutes at current thrust. 12 minutes. They needed 12 minutes, but the thruster would only last 5. The mathematics were clear. They would fail, unless they changed the mathematics. Doyen's mind raced. He looked at the power distribution, the thruster layout, the ship's trajectory, and then he saw it. A possibility. A very dangerous possibility. "Captain, shut down thrusters 1 through 6, Doyen said suddenly. Every Velcrin on the bridge turned to stare at him. Morven's voice came through the communicator. "What?" "That will reduce our thrust by 40%. Trust me," Doyen said. "Shut them down now and redirect all their power to the remaining thrusters. We'll have less total thrust, but each working thruster will be more efficient. And we'll reduce the thermal load on thruster assembly 4. It was insane. It went against every principle of propulsion mechanics. Reducing thrust when you needed to escape a gravity well should have been suicide. But Tholis had learned something over the past hours. The human saw patterns that he did not, solutions that violated logic, but somehow worked. "Do it," Tholis ordered. The bridge crew scrambled to obey. Power feeds shifted, thrusters shut down and others increased output. The ship's trajectory wobbled dangerously, but Tholis adjusted the controls, fighting to maintain their escape vector. "Thruster assembly 4 is cooling," Doyen reported, temperature dropping to safe levels. "We're going to make it." The planet filled the windows now so close they could see details of its atmosphere, swirling clouds of methane and ammonia. The ship skimmed the upper edges of that atmosphere, hull plates heating from friction. Warning alarms screamed about temperature stress and structural integrity. 10 kilometers to clear, the navigation officer said. 9. 8. Everyone held their breath. The ship groaned under the stress, metal flexing in ways it was never designed to flex. But it held together. All those improvised repairs, all those jury-rigged systems, all of Doyen's impossible solutions, they held. 5 kilometers. 4. 3. The planet's gravity began to release its grip. The ship's trajectory stabilized. The atmosphere fell away behind them. "Clear," the navigation officer said, his voice filled with disbelief. "We are clear of the gravity well." For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They had done the impossible. They had flown a massive starship, manually, with improvised controls and pushed beyond limit systems, and they had survived. Then the bridge erupted in celebration. Velcrin crew members embraced each other, abandoning their usual stoic composure. On the passenger decks, aliens of all species cheered and cried with relief. Tholis slumped in his command chair, his hands shaking from adrenaline. He looked at Doyen, standing beside him with his rumpled clothes and tired eyes. "You saved us," Tholis said simply. Doyen shook his head. "We saved us. I couldn't have done any of this without your crew, without you trusting me enough to try." But everyone on the bridge knew the truth. The human had been the difference between life and death. His improvisation, his refusal to accept failure, his ability to see solutions where there should have been none. That was what had saved them all. The Celestial Traverse drifted through space, battered but alive. Emergency lights still bathed many sections in red, and half the ship's systems ran on backup power or improvised repairs. But the immediate danger had passed. The reactor was stable, the planet was far behind them, and everyone on board was safe. In the engineering section, Doyen sat on the floor against a wall, too exhausted to stand. He had been awake for over 30 hours, working non-stop through crisis after crisis. His hands were covered in small cuts and burns from handling hot components and sharp metal edges. His clothes were stained with grease and coolant fluid. He had never been so tired in his life. Halvix approached with another cup of coffee and a meal packet from the emergency supplies. "You should eat something," the young Velkrin said. "And probably sleep for 3 days." Doyen accepted both gratefully. The coffee was cold now, but he drank it anyway. The meal packet contained some kind of nutrient paste that tasted vaguely like mushrooms. It was not good, but it was food. He ate it slowly, feeling his body start to recover from the adrenaline crash. Around him, Velkrin engineers worked to assess the full extent of the damage and begin proper repairs. They moved differently now, Doyen noticed. Less rigidly. They talked to each other, shared ideas, made suggestions without waiting for authorization. They had learned something from watching him work. Sometimes the best solution was not in the manual. Morven appeared, looking as tired as Doyen felt. The chief engineer sat down on the floor beside the human, an informal gesture that would have been unthinkable for a Velkrin officer before this crisis. "The captain wants to see you on the bridge when you are able," Morven said, "but there is no rush." "The ship will wait," Doyen nodded. "How bad is the overall damage?" "Bad enough that we will be limping to the nearest station at low speed. It will take us 3 days instead of the scheduled 8 hours. But we will make it," Morven paused. "Because of you." "I just did what needed to be done," Doyen said. It was becoming his standard response, but he meant it. He had not set out to be a hero. He had simply seen problems and fixed them the way any engineer would. "Why did you help us?" Morven asked suddenly. "You could have taken an evacuation pod. You had no obligation to risk yourself." Doyen was quiet for a moment, thinking about the question. "Where I come from, we have a saying, no one gets left behind. It's a human thing, I guess. We don't give up on people even when logic says we should. Especially when logic says we should. That is, irrational," Morven said, but there was no criticism in his voice. "Just curiosity." "Maybe," Doyen agreed. "But humans are pretty good at being irrational. Sometimes that's what saves us." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the ship being repaired around them. Engineers called out measurements and status reports. Tools clanged against metal. Slowly, methodically, the celestial traverse was being put back together. Eventually, Doyen forced himself to stand. His legs protested, but they held. "I should go see the captain." He made his way to the bridge, moving through corridors where passengers were returning to their cabins. Many of them stopped to look at him as he passed. Some nodded in respect. Others reached out to touch his shoulder or arm, gestures of gratitude in their various cultures. Doyen felt uncomfortable with the attention, but he understood. They had all faced death together, and they had survived together. The bridge doors opened, and he stepped inside. Captain Thalas stood at his command station, reviewing damage reports on multiple screens. He looked up as Doyen entered and straightened, assuming a formal posture. "Human engineer Doyen," Thalas said. "I asked you here to make an official statement on behalf of myself and my crew." Doyen waited, unsure what to expect. Thalas performed a gesture that Doyen had seen before but never directed at him, a formal Velkrin salute, all 4 hands pressed to chest in a complex pattern that signified deep respect. The other bridge officers did the same. "You saved this ship," Thalas said. "You saved 2,000 lives. And in doing so, you taught us something we had forgotten. We Velkrin pride ourselves on our precision, our procedures, our perfect systems, but we had become rigid. We forgot that true intelligence is not just following rules. It is knowing when to break them. You showed us that survival requires more than logic. It requires adaptability, creativity, and most importantly, the refusal to accept defeat even when all logic says there is no hope." Thalas lowered his hands. "I was wrong about your species. We all were. We thought humans were primitive, impulsive, dangerous, but you are something else entirely. You are survivors, and you reminded us what that truly means." Doyen did not know what to say. He had not expected this, had not expected any recognition at all. "I thank you, Captain. But I couldn't have done any of it without your crew. Morven gave me the authority to work. Halvix and the others trusted me even when my methods seemed crazy. You trusted me when I said we could fly the ship. This was a group effort. Perhaps, Thola said. But you were the catalyst. You showed us a different way to think, to solve problems, to survive. That is a gift we will not forget. He gestured to his console. I have sent a full report to Velcrin Transit Services and the Galactic Safety Council. You will be officially recognized for your actions. There will likely be ceremonies, awards, interviews. Doyen groaned internally. He hated that kind of attention. Can we maybe skip all that? I just want to get to my job on the Outer Reach station and work on mining equipment like I planned. A slight smile crossed Tholas's face, the first real expression of emotion Doyen had seen from him. I am afraid that will not be possible. You are now famous throughout the galaxy. This story will be told on every world, in every language. The human who rewrote the rules of survival. Great, Doyen muttered. That's exactly what I wanted. The bridge crew laughed, another unprecedented sound on a Velcrin vessel. The crisis had changed them all, made them more open, more flexible, more willing to embrace the unexpected. But seriously, Doyen said, thank you for trusting me. I know it wasn't easy. No, Tholas agreed. It was not. But it was necessary. And it was right. He paused. When we reach the station, Velcrin Transit Services has asked me to extend an offer to you. They want to hire you as a consultant, to teach other engineers your methods, to help us learn to think more like humans. Doyen considered this. It was not the quiet mining job he had planned on, but maybe it was something better, something more important. If he could help other species learn to adapt, to improvise, to survive the unexpected, that might be worth the loss of anonymity. I'll think about it, he said finally. That is all we ask, Tholas replied. Doyen left the bridge and returned to the engineering section, where Halvix had prepared a small cabin for him to rest. He collapsed onto the bed, still wearing his dirty clothes, too tired to even take off his boots. As he drifted toward sleep, he thought about everything that had happened. The crisis, the fear, the impossible solutions. He had not felt like a hero while doing any of it. He had just felt like an engineer trying to fix broken systems. But maybe that was what being human meant, seeing problems that seemed impossible and trying to fix them anyway. Refusing to give up even when logic and reason said there was no hope. It was not always logical. It was not always smart. But it worked. And in the end, that was what mattered. He closed his eyes and slept, dreamless and deep, while the celestial traverse limped toward safety through the vast darkness of space. 3 days later, the celestial traverse arrived at Outpost Gamma 7, a massive space station that served as a hub for ships traveling through this sector of space. The station's control tower had been monitoring the damaged ship's approach, and word had spread quickly about what had happened. By the time the celestial traverse docked, thousands of beings had gathered to watch. Doyen stood in his small cabin, looking at himself in the mirror. He had finally gotten a chance to shower and put on clean clothes. Someone from the ship's stores had found him a new work jacket to replace his ruined one. He looked normal again, just another engineer except for the exhaustion still visible in his eyes. There was a soft knock on his door. Halvix entered, looking nervous. They are ready for you. The passengers are gathering in the main disembarkation area. They want to see you before they leave. Doyen had been dreading this. He had never been comfortable with attention, with crowds, with being treated as someone special. But he owed these people at least this much. They had survived together. He could not just hide away and avoid them. All right, he said. Let's go. They walked through the ship one last time. Repair crews were already at work in many sections, cutting away damaged hull plates and replacing fried circuits. The ship would be in dock for months, undergoing complete reconstruction. But it would fly again. Doyen had made sure of that. The main disembarkation area was massive, designed to handle thousands of passengers at once. It was packed with aliens of every shape and size, all waiting. When Doyen entered, a hush fell over the crowd. Then slowly they began to applaud. It started with a few individuals clapping their hands, tentacles, or whatever appendages they possessed. Then more joined in. Within seconds, the entire crowd was making noise. Applause, cheers, clicks, whistles, sounds of appreciation in 100 different languages. The sound was overwhelming. Doyen felt his face flush with embarrassment. He raised a hand in acknowledgement, hoping that would be enough. But the crowd pressed closer. People wanting to thank him personally, to shake his hand or touch his shoulder or express gratitude in their own cultural ways. An elderly Velcrin approached, leaning on a walking stick. "Young human," she said in a voice that trembled with age. "My family was on this ship. My children, my grandchildren. You saved them all. I have no words sufficient to thank you." "You don't need to thank me," Doyen said. "I'm just glad everyone made it." But she shook her head. "You are too modest. That is a human trait, I think. You do extraordinary things and act as if they are ordinary." She pressed something into his hand, a small medallion with a Velcrin family symbol. "This belonged to my mate who passed many years ago. It brought him luck. Perhaps it will bring you luck as well." Doyen accepted the gift, touched by the gesture. "I'll treasure it." "Thank you." The crowd parted and Captain Thalas appeared with his senior officers. They all wore formal uniforms now, clean and pressed. Thalas carried a small case. "Engineer Doyen," the captain said formally, "on behalf of Velcrin Transit Services and the Galactic Safety Council, I present you with the Star of Valor, the highest civilian award that can be given in our society. You have demonstrated courage, skill, and selflessness in the face of certain death. You have earned the respect and gratitude of every being who travels through space." He opened the case, revealing a beautiful crystal star suspended in a magnetic field. It glowed with a soft blue light, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. Doyen took the award carefully. It was heavier than it looked. "Thank you, Captain. But I want everyone to know, I couldn't have done any of this without your crew. Morven Halvix, all the engineers who helped. They trusted me when they had no reason to. They learned to work in new ways, to take risks, to improvise. That's what saved us. Not me alone, but all of us working together." Tholas nodded. "You speak truth. This crisis taught us all valuable lessons. But the lessons began with you." The crowd applauded again. Doyen looked out at all the faces, human, Velcrin, and dozens of other species. They were all so different, but they shared something now. They had all survived because they had been willing to work together, to trust each other, to try solutions that seemed impossible. Maybe that was the real lesson. Not that humans were special, but that every species had something to contribute. The Velcrin had their precision and their advanced technology. Humans had their adaptability and refusal to quit. Other species brought their own unique perspectives and abilities. Together they were stronger than any one species alone. As the crowd began to disperse, heading for the station's gates and their own onward journeys, Morven approached Doyen. "Have you considered the job offer? To work with Velcrin Transit as a consultant." Doyen looked at the metal in his hands, then at the ship through the viewing windows. The celestial traverse looked battered and wounded, but it was still intact. Still salvageable. Like everything he had worked on in his life, it could be fixed. "Yes," he said finally. "I'll do it. But on one condition." "Name it." "I want to help train engineers from all species, not just Velcrin. Humans, Velcrin, everyone. We need to learn from each other. That's how we get better." Morven considered this, then smiled, an expression Doyen had rarely seen on a Velcrin face. "Agreed, I think that is an excellent idea." Halvix approached, looking sad. "So you will not be working on the mining station after all?" "Afraid not," Doyen said. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe I'm supposed to do this instead. Teach others, share what I know, learn from them. It's not what I planned, but sometimes the best things aren't planned." The young Velcrin engineer nodded. "I would like to request a transfer. To work with you, if that is allowed. You have taught me much already. I want to learn more." Doyen smiled. "I'd be honored to have you on the team." They walked through the station together, human and Velcrin, talking about engineering and improvisation and the future. Around them, the galaxy continued its endless motion, ships arriving and departing, beings from thousands of worlds crossing paths and sharing their stories. And among all those stories, one would be told more than any other. The story of the Celestial Traverse. The story of the day everything went wrong and an ordinary human rewrote the rules of survival. But for Doyen, it was just another day, another problem solved, another system fixed, another impossible situation made possible through hard work and refusing to quit. That was what humans did. That was what they had always done. From the earliest days on Earth to now, scattered across the galaxy. They survived. Not because they were perfect or the strongest or the smartest. They survived because when faced with the impossible, they simply said, "Let's try anyway," and got to work. And sometimes, just sometimes, that was enough to change everything. As Doyen looked back at the Celestial Traverse one last time, he thought about all the other ships out there, all the other crews, all the other crises that would come. He could not save everyone. He could not fix every problem. But he could teach others his methods, share his perspective, help them learn to see solutions where before they saw only obstacles. Maybe that was his real purpose. Not to be a hero, but to be a teacher. To help others understand that survival was not about having all the answers. It was about refusing to stop looking for them. He turned away from the viewing window and walked deeper into the station, ready for whatever came next. Behind him, the Celestial Traverse sat in its docking bay, wounded but undefeated, a testament to what was possible when beings refused to accept failure. Just like the human who had saved it, just like all humans everywhere, who faced the darkness of space and decided to explore it anyway, armed with nothing but curiosity, determination, and the absolute refusal to give up. The galaxy had learned something important. Humanity was not special because of their technology or their strength. Humanity was special because they looked at impossible situations and made them possible through sheer stubborn will. And that, more than any advanced machine or perfect procedure, was what would help all species survive whatever challenges the vast universe might bring. Together they would face the darkness. Together they would find solutions. Together they would rewrite what survival meant, one impossible problem at a time.